If you truly want to understand what betrayal feels like, don't picture shouting, smashed plates, or neighbors calling the police. Picture this instead. Standing outside your own home in the damp London cold, carrying nothing but a worn-out overnight bag, while the man who once swore to love you gently closes the door in your face and hands your keys to another woman. My name is Elena Whitford, and on the night everything collapsed, I realized something terrifying. You can share a house, a bed, a life with someone, and still not know the person sleeping beside you. I remember the streetlights glowing weakly through the mist. I remember my hands shaking as I tried the key again and again, praying the lock was broken, not my marriage. And I remember his face calm, rehearsed, almost bored as he said, "Elena, you shouldn't be here." But the part that still haunts me isn't his words. It's the sound of her laughter drifting down the hallway. Light, carefree, wearing my robe, in my house, with my husband. That was the night I lost everything. My home, my savings, my marriage, my certainty about who I was. All I had left was a faded debit card my father gave me when I was 18, a card I'd never used, shoved so deep into my wallet I'd forgotten it existed. A card he told me to keep for the day you have nowhere left to stand. I thought there might be a few pounds on it, enough for a taxi, maybe a cheap motel. I had no idea it would make a bank manager go pale. I had no idea my father had built something enormous and hidden it for me. I had no idea that losing everything was the beginning of becoming someone new. Before I go on, tell me, where in the UK are you listening from? Tap the like button so this story finds the people who need to hear it. Because what happened next changed everything. The night I lost my home, the air in Kensington felt colder than winter itself. Not the sharp, biting cold that stings your skin, but the kind that seeps into your bones. The kind that tells you no longer belong where you're standing. I walked down the quiet, perfectly manicured street, past the white terrace houses with warm windows and soft yellow lamps glowing inside. Families were having dinner. Children were laughing. Someone was ironing in front of a telly. Every house seemed alive, except the one I had just been pushed out of. My suitcase wheel rattled against the pavement, the sound embarrassingly loud in the silence of the neighborhood. It echoed the way my heart felt, unsteady, scraped, exposed. Minutes earlier, I'd stood in the doorway of the home Oliver and I had shared for 7 years. 7 years of birthdays, late-night pasta, Sunday papers, arguments, reconciliations, and the quiet, comfortable routines that make you believe you're safe. But safety is an illusion, one that can be snatched away with nothing more than a lock changed and a door closed. The moment the latch clicked behind me, I realized something that should have terrified me but strangely didn't. I had nowhere to go. Not a single friend I could call at that hour without feeling ashamed. Not a flat of my own. Not even cash for a hotel. My marriage had collapsed. And somehow, so had the life I thought I'd built around it. I reached the end of the street and stopped beneath a street lamp. The mist wrapped around it like a halo, softening the edges of everything but the truth. I took out my phone and opened our joint banking app. The screen spun, loaded, then displayed a number so small, so merciless, it didn't seem real. £0. I blinked, closed the app, opened it again. Still £0. My breath caught in my throat. Oliver hadn't just locked me out. He'd drained every last pound from the account. From our account, from the savings I'd built long before I ever met him. There's a special kind of pain that comes when you realize the person you shared a life with has planned your downfall, quietly, calmly, with no hesitation at all. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the balance. It might have been minutes. It might have been an hour. Eventually, I lowered my phone and let my legs carry me somewhere, anywhere. London at night is strange when you no longer have a place in it. The city feels enormous, indifferent, as if it's shrugging you off its shoulder. I walked past Gloucester Road Station, where crowds were spilling out from the last trains. Past the late-night bakery, whose sweet smell made my stomach pinch with hunger. Past the bus stop, where a couple was kissing. Something that once would have made me smile, but now felt like watching a world I no longer belonged to. By the time I reached Hyde Park, my feet were numb and my heart felt hollow. I sank onto a bench beneath the trees. Leaves rustled overhead, and distant traffic hummed along Bayswater Road. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful, until my reality returned like a wave crashing against a cliff. Homeless, bankrupt, discarded. It's astonishing how quickly your life can be unmade. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, trying to shield against the cold that wasn't just weather, but grief, humiliation, disbelief, all knotted into one. When I finally forced myself to check my wallet for loose change, I found almost nothing. A couple of coins, receipts, a photo of my father, his hand on my shoulder, smiling with that quiet pride he never voiced out loud. And behind it, the old, faded debit card he'd given me when I was 18. I hadn't thought about it in years. At the time, he'd pressed it into my palm with surprising seriousness. "Keep this, Ellie. Don't use it unless you've truly got nowhere left to stand." I remember laughing, telling him he was being dramatic. Life seemed so simple then. I couldn't imagine a reality where I'd ever need a secret backup from my father. But sitting on that park bench, with no home, no money, no partner, I realized I finally understood what he meant. Nowhere left to stand. I ran my thumb over the card's worn edge. It wasn't even the modern plastic, more like the old matte cards from the early 2000s. It probably didn't even work anymore. The account was most likely closed, or held a balance of maybe £5 or £10. Whatever was left from my teenage Saturday job that I'd never withdrawn. Still, it was something. A tiny thread in a life torn apart. And sometimes, a thread is enough to keep you from falling. A drizzle began, gentle at first, then persistent. I checked my phone again, 12% battery. If I didn't move soon, I'd be stuck with no shelter and a dead phone. A terrible combination for a woman alone in central London. So I stood, pulled my coat tighter, and began walking towards Victoria, where I remembered seeing a branch of Royal South Bank. Every step felt like wading through water. My legs were heavy, my head foggy, and the humiliation of the night replayed on a loop in my mind. Oliver's face, his calm voice, her laugh, the door closing. It's strange how betrayal doesn't feel sharp at first. It feels numb, like your brain is protecting you from understanding too much too quickly. By the time I reached the bank, the sky was lightening. London was waking up. Delivery vans, humming, street sweepers brushing the pavements, commuters gathering at crossings. And I walked into a bank with an old card in my hand, and the last fragments of my dignity in my pocket. The lobby smelled of polished floors and printer paper. A young teller looked up and gave a polite smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" My voice cracked as I spoke. I need to check the balance of an old account." "How old?" he asked. "About 16 years. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he took the card and my ID. As he typed into the system, his cheerful expression faltered. He leaned closer to the screen, typed again, then again. "Is there a problem?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up abruptly. "One moment, please." He disappeared into the back office. My stomach clenched. Had the account been flagged for closure? Did I owe fees? Had it been erased completely? I waited and waited, long enough for panic to start creeping up my spine. When the teller returned, he wasn't alone. Behind him was the branch manager, a silver-haired man with measured footsteps and a face that suddenly looked far too serious for a simple balance inquiry. He approached me. "Ms. Whitford, would you mind stepping into the private room with us?" The world seemed to tilt. This wasn't about a few forgotten pounds. This wasn't routine. Something was wrong, or right, in a way I couldn't yet understand. I followed them into the glass office, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The manager closed the door, turned to me, and said, in a voice far too gentle to be casual, "Ms. Whitford, I believe there's something you need to see." The room they led me into wasn't large, but it felt impossibly quiet. Everything was glass and polished oak, the kind of room where people are usually told they've won something astonishing or lost something catastrophic. The branch manager closed the blinds with a slow, deliberate movement, then sat opposite me. The young teller hovered near the door, unsure whether to stay or leave, his expression tinged with something between concern and disbelief. "Ms. Whitford," the manager began, folding his hands, "I must ask that you stay calm. What I'm about to show you may be unexpected." I almost laughed. Unexpected? I had been thrown out of my own home hours ago, abandoned in the rain, stripped of every penny, every belonging, every scrap of stability I'd ever had. What more could possibly surprise me now? He turned his computer screen towards me. My name stared back at me, Elena Whitford, but not attached to a current account or a savings account. No. It appeared beside something else entirely. Whitford Heritage Holdings Limited. Primary beneficiary and successor owner. Elena Marie Whitford. Status: dormant activation triggered. My throat tightened. What is this?" I whispered. The manager cleared his throat. "This account is linked not to personal banking, but to a corporate structure established by your father, Mr. Jonathan Whitford." I frowned. My father? But he was a carpenter. He made bookshelves and dining tables. He didn't run companies. The manager gave a faint, sympathetic smile. "Ms. Whitford, with all due respect, I don't think your father was quite the man you believed him to be." He began to open documents. Layers upon layers of old scans, certificates, land deeds, investment summaries, legal clauses, all bearing the same name. Whitford Heritage Holdings Limited. Founded 18 years ago. Registered under an address in Surrey I vaguely remembered visiting once as a child. A place with long fields and oak trees where my father used to take photographs, telling me it was a little piece of peace. I had no idea that piece of peace stretched across 1,400 acres of land. I stared at the figures, struggling to connect the quiet, gentle man who fixed squeaky chairs for neighbours with this labyrinth of wealth and planning. Why? Why didn't he ever tell me? I murmured. Why would he hide something like this? The manager clicked on one final file, a scanned letter, handwritten, neat, recognizably my father's. It felt like a punch to the chest, simply seeing his handwriting again. "This was sealed until the activation trigger was met," he said softly, "which happened last night at precisely 22:14. What trigger? A clause indicating that if you, his beneficiary, were to become financially destitute, meaning your primary accounts fell to a balance of 0, the trust would activate. I felt the air leave my lungs. My father had written a safety net into the foundation of this company, a net designed solely for me. A net woven with conditions so specific. He must have anticipated something like this could one day happen. My hands trembled as I clicked open the letter. My Ellie, if you are reading this, I am gone, and life has pushed you to a place I prayed you'd never reach. Not because you are weak, but because the world is cruel in ways that good people never expect. This company, this land, this wealth, none of it is meant to make you comfortable. It is meant to give you ground to stand on when someone tries to take yours away. Don't cry. Don't crumble. You are a Whitford. Your mother was strong. You are stronger. Stand up, Ellie. Build something that cannot be taken from you. With all the love in my bones, Dad. I was crying before the last line. But these tears were different from the ones I shed outside my house. Those had come from loss. These came from recognition. My father, quiet, modest, always smelling of sawdust and turpentine, had built an empire in the shadows and entrusted it to me. The manager gave me time. He offered tissues, a glass of water. But what I needed wasn't comfort. It was clarity. "What exactly do I own?" I asked, wiping my cheeks. He tapped a few keys and brought up a detailed breakdown. "Extensive rural land across Surrey," he began. "Some registered as conservation woodland, some as agricultural leaseholds. Additionally, shares in 3 renewable energy companies, long-term bonds, a dormant real estate holding in Reading, and," he paused, "substantial capital reserves." "How substantial?" He hesitated. 8 figures, Miss Whitford. Silence filled the room, not the stunned, breathless silence of joy, but the sharp, disbelieving kind of silence when your identity has shifted in a single moment. I wasn't just a woman abandoned by her husband. I wasn't a penniless wife cast aside like rubbish. I was the heir of a hidden legacy, a legacy strong enough to rebuild a life, and possibly dismantle one. My heart thumped louder, not with fear now, but with a strange, dangerous kind of calm. What do I need to do? I asked. To take control, he straightened. We'll arrange a meeting with the Trust's legal team. They've been waiting years for this activation. Once you sign, you'll become the official CEO. CEO. Me. The words felt unreal, like trying on a coat that didn't belong to me yet. But as the thought settled, I realized something profound. It did belong to me. It always had. Miss Whitford, the manager continued, you have options now, and you have power, more than you may realize. Power, a word Oliver never wanted me to have, a word I was beginning to taste for the first time. As we wrapped up the meeting, the teller walked me to the exit, not with the casual politeness he'd shown earlier, but with a kind of reverence, almost nervousness. People treat you differently when they sense you're no longer powerless. Outside, the morning air smelled different, cleaner, sharper, full of possibility. Buses rumbled past. Commuters rushed along the pavement, and for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something inside me shift back into place. Not the life I'd had, not the woman I'd been. Something new, something steadier, something my father believed in long before I believed in myself. I wasn't just Elena the wife thrown out in the rain. I was Elena Whitford, daughter of Jonathan Whitford, successor of a legacy I had no idea existed. A legacy my husband had tried to bury me without knowing I had roots deeper than anything he could cut down. I stood on the pavement, the city bustling around me, and I whispered to myself, it's time to stand up. It was time to become the woman my father knew I could be, and the woman Oliver would never, ever see coming. The strange thing about having your life collapse is that the first 24 hours feel unreal, almost dreamlike. Everything moves slowly, like you are watching your own story through a window. But then comes the moment when you must decide what to do next. That moment arrived for me the morning after the discovery at the bank. I woke early, far earlier than I intended. The hotel room was quiet, too quiet for a mind that refused to rest. London was beginning to wake, the low hum of buses and delivery vans drifting through the window. And for the first time since Oliver locked me out of our home, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt ready. The truth was simple. I had inherited a company I knew nothing about, land I had never walked on, investments I had never heard of, and a responsibility I had never once imagined would be mine. For 5 years of marriage, Oliver handled everything related to money. He liked it that way. He liked me small, grateful, quiet. He liked being the one to say, leave it to me, Elena, you wouldn't understand. And for a long time, I believed him. But that version of me no longer existed. I contacted the legal team linked to Whitford Heritage Holdings and requested the earliest meeting possible. They were ready within hours. It was as though they had been waiting for this exact day, exactly as my father had predicted. Their office sat in a discreet building in Westminster, the sort of place you walk past 100 times without noticing. Inside, it was a world of polished floors, deep green walls, and softly spoken professionalism. The kind of place where power hums beneath the surface rather than announces itself. At the head of the meeting table sat a woman named Margaret Locke, immaculately dressed, silver hair swept back, eyes sharp enough to cut through excuses. Mrs. Whitford, she said, rising to shake my hand, we have looked forward to meeting you. Please, sit. There is much to discuss. Over the next hour, they unfolded my father's world piece by piece. The company, the land, the private investments, the trust clause, the governance structure awaiting transfer. But then Margaret paused, folded her hands, and said quietly, there is one more matter, and I must be direct. Whitford Heritage Holdings is a sleeping giant, but it cannot run itself. If you wish to lead it, You must be prepared to learn everything your father prepared, but never taught you. I nodded. I know, I want to learn. She studied me for a long moment. You realize this will take time. This cannot be done in a few weeks. You will need at least 2 months of intensive training just to understand the fundamentals. Financial structures, land management, corporate law, asset protection. This was all designed for you, but you were never meant to step into it unprepared. I surprised even myself when I answered almost instantly. 2 months, I will give it everything. It felt strange to say the words with such certainty. Only a few days earlier, I had been standing in the rain outside a home that was no longer mine. Now I was speaking to a woman who looked at me as though I was meant to sit at the head of a boardroom. Margaret gave a small, approving smile, the sort reserved for students who show promise. Your father expected this, she said, and he left instructions for your training. We will follow them exactly. For the next 2 months, my life transformed. Every morning, I sat in a private office provided by the firm. Stacks of files, digital dashboards, financial models, maps of the land my father had quietly purchased over nearly 20 years. It was overwhelming at first. More than once, I stared at the spreadsheets and felt panic swirl in my stomach. But panic is a temporary emotion. Determination lasts longer. And Margaret, ruthless, brilliant Margaret, refused to let me drown. She taught me how to read balance sheets until the lines began to make sense. She drilled corporate law into me until I could recite clauses without checking notes. She made me analyze fictional scenarios, dissect land disputes, rebuild imaginary portfolios from scratch. If I made a mistake, she did not comfort me. She corrected me. Sharply. Precisely. Because, as she reminded me often, you are no longer a woman being rescued, Elena. You are a woman learning how to rule. There were days I went home exhausted, muscles aching, brain burning. Nights when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the words of my father's letter echoing over and over. Build something no one can take from you. And there were other nights, harder nights, when memories of Oliver intruded, the little lies he told. The way he made me feel childish for not understanding accounts he never let me see. The subtle dismissals, the gentle condescension, death by 1,000 small humiliations. The realization stung more than anything he had done on the night he threw me out. I had trusted him so completely that I never once noticed how much he enjoyed dimming my light. But every day that passed, the light grew brighter, steadier, sharper. By the end of the 2nd month, I was no longer the same woman who had walked into that bank, soaked from the rain and trembling in disbelief. I was ready. On the final day of training, Margaret called me into her office. Her desk was empty, except for a single black folder. It is time, she said. Inside the folder was the final set of documents. Transfer of leadership, CEO appointment, authorization of all assets, every signature line empty, waiting for me. My hand trembled slightly as I held the pen. Not from fear, from understanding, from accepting the weight of what this moment meant. I signed the first line, then the second, then the last. Margaret stood. Congratulations, Miss Whitford. You are now the Chief Executive Officer of Whitford Heritage Holdings Limited. The title settled onto my shoulders like a cloak, heavy, dignified, warm. I walked out of the building with my head held high. The air tasted different, clearer, sharper, like the world had shifted half an inch. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt something close to peace. But peace is rarely permanent. Within an hour of returning to the flat I was renting temporarily, my phone rang. An unknown number. No voicemail. Just a text message that followed immediately after. Oliver wants to see you. He says it is urgent. I stared at the message for a long time. And then I smiled, not kindly, not nostalgically, but with a quiet understanding. Of course he wanted to see me now. Of course he did. The tables were beginning to turn, and he could feel the shift long before he understood it. I put the phone down, walked to the mirror, and looked at the woman staring back. A woman no longer afraid. A woman no longer discarded. A woman preparing for the storm she herself would unleash. It was time for Oliver to learn a lesson. A lesson about underestimating the wrong woman. A lesson about what happens when you try to destroy someone who was never meant to break. This time, he would not be the one writing the ending. I would. There is a particular kind of silence that comes before a confrontation. Not the peaceful silence of early mornings or the soft quiet before sleep. No, this silence is heavier. It gathers in the air like fog, thick enough to breathe in, cold enough to unsettle the bones. That was the silence I felt walking toward the restaurant where Oliver insisted we meet. It was the same place he used to take me on anniversaries. The same place where he once told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. The same place where, 5 years ago, he'd held my hands across the table and asked me to marry him. Back then, I believed him. Tonight, I would let him believe whatever he wished. The restaurant sat just off Kensington High Street, lit by warm yellow lamps that tried, rather desperately, to appear inviting. But nothing could soften the tension in my spine as I pushed open the glass door. Oliver was already there. He had chosen a corner table, of course, somewhere private, somewhere he could control the tone of the conversation, just as he always had. He stood the moment he saw me, face set in an expression halfway between remorse and charm. His favorite combination. "Elena," he breathed, as though saying my name hurt him. "Thank you for coming." I gave him a polite, cool smile. It was not a smile he recognized. He gestured to the seat opposite him. The same seat where I used to sit when I still thought we were a team. I sat without a word. The waiter arrived instantly. Oliver ordered wine without asking what I wanted, another habit he had never shaken. When the waiter left, he leaned forward, both elbows on the table, eyes softening as though he were preparing to deliver a Shakespearean monologue. "Elena, I've made mistakes." I almost laughed, genuinely. Not cruelly, just with a kind of detached amusement at how predictable human behavior can be. "Mistakes," I repeated softly, inviting him to continue. "Yes," he said, grabbing the word like a lifeline. "I was under pressure. Business has been stressful, things spiraled, I didn't handle it well. But I never meant to hurt you." I held his gaze without blinking. In the past, that alone would have made me shrink. Tonight, it made him shift in his seat. "You threw me out of my own home," I said calmly. "You locked the door behind me. You emptied our accounts. You told security to remove me like I was nothing." He flinched, just barely. "Elena, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what I was doing." "That," I replied gently, "is not true. You knew exactly what you were doing. You prepared for it. You planned it." His jaw tightened. He looked down at his hands as though they might provide the right words. Then he tried again. "I want us to fix this," he said quietly. "I realize now what I've lost. I was stupid. I didn't appreciate you. But when I saw you the other day, you looked incredible. Strong, confident. I remembered why I fell in love with you." Ah, there it was. The manipulation wearing the mask of admiration. I let him speak. Every sentence he uttered gave me more clarity, more certainty, more reason to stay silent. "You've changed," he said finally, "and I want to change too. We can rebuild, together." I took my time responding. Enough time for him to wonder which way the wind was blowing. "Oliver," I said softly, "would you mind being honest with me? Entirely honest?" He nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yes, anything." "Are you apologizing because you regret what you did, or because you've realized what I now have?" The color drained slightly from his face. "What do you mean?" he asked, too smoothly, too quickly. I didn't answer. I simply tilted my head the way Margaret had taught me, a subtle gesture that forces the other person to fill the silence. He swallowed. "Elena," he said again, voice tighter, "what exactly are you suggesting?" "Nothing," I replied with a light smile. "Not yet," but his eyes flickered with fear. A flicker only, but enough. The wine arrived. He lifted his glass, but I didn't touch mine. Instead, I leaned forward. "Oliver," I said calmly, "what is the real reason you asked to meet tonight?" He hesitated, and there it was. The truth, bubbling beneath the surface. His company was struggling, badly. He was hoping I didn't know. He was hoping I still believed the man who always said, "Don't worry, sweetheart, let me handle the finances." But I had spent 2 months learning under the sharpest mind in London. I now knew how to read a company the way people read a book, and Oliver's company was a collapsing story. "Elena," he began slowly, "there's a project I'm trying to secure, a very important one. And when you walked into that meeting room last time, you surprised me. Truly. Maybe we could help each other." "Help," I repeated. "Or save." He tried to laugh it off, but the sound rang hollow. "Elena, please," he said, dropping the act for a moment. "I'm trying to be sincere." "That," I said quietly, "is the problem." He frowned. "The only time you try to be sincere is when you need something." His lips parted in protest, but I held up a hand. "Don't worry," I added. "I'm not here to punish you. Not yet. I'm here because I want to understand what you're planning, so I can decide whether it concerns me." His eyes darted away again. Fear, regret, calculating, all at once. Oliver was finally beginning to realize something that should have terrified him. I was no longer the Elena he had built his power upon. The waiter cleared our plates, though I hadn't eaten a bite. When we were alone again, Oliver leaned forward, breaking the last of his fragile composure. "I need investors," he blurted out. "The banks aren't approving new loans. My team is stretched thin. I just need a chance, a boost, something to stabilize things." I nodded slowly. "And you think I can provide that?" He hesitated. "Yes, I mean, we could benefit each other." Finally, the truth peeked through. I smiled, not warm, not cruel, simply tired of the charade. "Thank you," I said softly. "I appreciate your honesty, truly." He looked almost relieved. But relief is a fragile thing, and I was about to break it. "Oliver," I said, rising from my chair, "meet me at my office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Bring your financial statements, all of them." He blinked. "My, what? Why?" "Because if you want my help," I replied, slipping my coat over my shoulders, "I need to know exactly what I'm stepping into." He stood abruptly, panic cracking his voice. "Elena, please don't involve other people. We can discuss this privately." I turned to him with a gentle, devastating calm. "Oliver, you made our marriage public the moment you humiliated me in lobby security. Now you will make your finances public the moment you walk into my office." He froze. "Good night, Oliver," I said quietly. "We'll speak in the morning." And as I walked out of the restaurant, leaving him standing there with fear stiffening his posture, I finally understood something. The most powerful moment in a woman's life is not the day she fights back. It's the day she realizes she no longer needs to. The next morning arrived with the kind of sharp, silver light London gets on cold days. Not bright, not warm, but clear, almost unforgiving. The sort of light that reveals every truth, every fault line, every crack beneath a polished surface. I arrived at the headquarters of Whitford Heritage Holdings earlier than usual, long before staff filtered in. The building was quiet, humming faintly with electricity and possibility. The security guard nodded at me with a respect I still wasn't fully accustomed to. But today wasn't about comfort. Today was about precision. Oliver was due in my office at 10 o'clock. He would walk into the room believing he still had some control, some leverage, some charm left to wield. He was wrong. By 9:30, the boardroom was already prepared. A long table, a carafe of water, my notebook. And beside me, Margaret's second in command, a man named Thomas Gray. Younger, sharper, and brilliant in the way a scalpel is brilliant. Cold, efficient, designed to cut exactly where needed. Thomas had spent the past 3 evenings analyzing every document Whitford Heritage Holdings had been able to discreetly obtain about Oliver's company. And what he found was worse than I expected. "Elena," he said quietly, turning a page toward me, "if these numbers are accurate, and we believe they are, your husband's company is weeks from collapse." "Ex-husband," I corrected. Thomas inclined his head. "Yes, ex-husband." I appreciated that he didn't soften the word. "Truth, especially bitter truth, should not be wrapped in cotton," he continued. He has debt disguised under supplier contracts, deferred payments he cannot honor, inflated asset reports, and this. He slid a final sheet in front of me. Illegal material substitution on 2 residential developments. A chill went through my body. Not shock, no, that emotion had abandoned me long ago where Oliver was concerned. This was something deeper, darker. He endangered people? I whispered. Thomas looked straight at me. Yes, to cut costs. To maintain margins he could no longer sustain. I closed my eyes for a moment. A strange thought crossed my mind. How much of the man I married had ever been real? Or had he always been this? A polished veneer hiding rot underneath. Before I could dwell on it, the receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom. "Miss Whitford? Mr. Hart has arrived. He's asking whether he should come straight up." I smiled. Still calm, still steady. "Yes," I said into the receiver. "Send him in." A few seconds of silence, then footsteps. I didn't rise when he entered. Oliver walked in wearing his most expensive suit, the navy one he reserved for meetings he wanted to impress. But today, the suit looked as though it belonged to someone else entirely. He looked smaller inside it, tighter, unsettled. "Elena," he said with forced warmth. "Thank you for—" "Sit," I replied gently. Something in my voice made him obey immediately. He sat opposite me, hands clasped too tightly. His eyes flicked to Thomas, then back to me. "And he is?" Oliver asked. "This is Thomas Gray," I said. "Senior advisor to my office. He will be joining us." Oliver gave a stiff smile. "Oh, I thought this was private." "Nothing involving money," I said calmly, "should ever be private." The moment hung between us, and then Thomas opened the first file. "Mr. Hart," he began, "your company's financial structure contains several concerning irregularities. We would like clarification." Oliver shifted. "Look, things have been challenging. The market has slowed, planning permissions delayed." "That does not explain falsified supplier invoices," Thomas said without blinking. Oliver froze. My heart did not race. My breath did not quicken. For the first time, I realized revenge wasn't fire. It was ice. "Elena," he said, trying to smile at me instead of Thomas. "Could we maybe talk alone? I feel like this is—" "No," I replied softly. "This is exactly what I want." Thomas slid another sheet forward. "This shows your deferred debt to 16 independent suppliers, many months overdue." Oliver swallowed. "And this," Thomas added, placing a final document on the table, "is a lab report concluding that the concrete used on your Camden and Haverford developments is substandard, posing structural risks." Oliver's face drained of all colour. "Elena, listen. I can explain." "I'm listening," I answered. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He ran a hand through his hair, exposing the panic he could no longer contain. "I was desperate, all right. I had cash flow problems. I thought if I got the Southford project, everything would stabilize. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." "You didn't mean to hurt anyone," I repeated, as though tasting the sentence. He shook his head quickly. "Elena, please. You know me. You know I'm not a criminal." I tilted my head. "Are you sure?" He looked at me as though I'd slapped him. "Elena, for God's sake." "You threw me out," I said quietly. "You drained our accounts. You humiliated me publicly. You made sure I had nothing. And now you want me to believe you feel remorse?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I was losing everything," he finally whispered. I panicked. "You panicked," I echoed. "So you tried to destroy me to soften the fall." He blinked rapidly. "Elena, I didn't know you'd end up like this. I didn't think you'd—" "Survive?" I offered. He looked at me, and in that second, something fundamental shifted between us. He didn't see the woman he had once controlled. He didn't see the woman he had once chosen as his weakest link. No, he saw exactly what I had become. A threat. "Elena," he breathed, "I need time. Just time. If you can help me restructure." "Help?" I leaned forward. "Help you recover after you tried to strip me of everything?" "Elena, I'm begging you. Please, don't ruin me." "Ruin you?" My tone stayed calm. You did that yourself. He looked at Thomas, then back at me. So what now? He whispered. What do you want me to do? What a question. What a perfect, poetic question. I stood, slowly. What I want, Oliver, I said softly, is for you to understand that actions have consequences, and for the first time in your life, you will face them. He swallowed loudly. Elena, please. You will hand over every document, I continued. You will provide complete transparency. You will cooperate with a full audit, and you will not lie. Not once. His voice cracked. And if I refuse, I stepped closer to him. Refuse, I said, and your lenders will hear from my legal team by the end of the day. Refuse, and every supplier you owe will be informed of your attempt to disguise debt. Refuse, and every unsafe development you built will be reported to local authorities. His breath hitched. Elena, please, I'm begging you. I met his eyes. Good, I said quietly. Begging suits you. Thomas closed the file. We will begin the audit immediately, Mr. Hart. You will receive instructions within the hour. Oliver slumped back into his chair, a man realizing his kingdom was only sand. As he scraped together the last of his dignity and left the boardroom, I watched him go, not with hatred, not with satisfaction, but with a calm, steady resolve. He had built his power on taking mine away. Now, I would take back everything, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something vital. Some men learn only when the world stops protecting them, and I was done protecting him. There is something strangely quiet about the days that follow a broken man's realization. Not the peace that comes after a storm, but the eerie stillness before the next wave hits. For the next 48 hours, Oliver tried to hold himself together. He sent polite emails. He replied quickly to every request from Thomas. He pretended to be cooperative, grateful, reasonable. But beneath the surface, he was unraveling. I could see it in the desperate timestamps of his emails, the inconsistencies in his documents, and the tone of someone trying to put out fires faster than they could ignite. And meanwhile, something else was happening. Something Oliver had never anticipated. I was becoming very, very good at being in power. Whitford Heritage Holdings, once a sleeping archive of my father's foresight, was now a living, breathing entity under my hands. Teams reported to me. Consultants answered to me. Meetings revolved around decisions I made with clarity I never knew I possessed. Every day, the land I had inherited gained context. Every number had meaning. Every asset had purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being guided. I was leading, and people listened. Still, the matter with Oliver pressed on the horizon like a gathering storm. 2 days after the audit began, Thomas entered my office without knocking, something he only did when absolutely necessary. Elena, he said, we have a problem. I set down the file in my hand. What kind of problem? He sat opposite me, lowering his voice. Some of Oliver's financial documents don't match the digital records. We suspected errors at first, but this looks deliberate. I didn't react immediately. When you say deliberate, do you mean fabrication? Thomas finished. He has altered statements. Some numbers he inflated, some he hid entirely. And one of his lenders has flagged suspicious activity. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, I said, so he lied. Thomas nodded. And he is still lying. A part of me, the part that still carried the ghost of our marriage, felt a flicker of sadness. But it wasn't sadness for him. It was sadness for the version of myself who had once believed him incapable of deceit. I want everything, I said quietly. Every discrepancy, every alteration, every concealed debt. Thomas gave a single sharp nod. We're already compiling it. Before he left the room, he asked a question I had not expected. Elena, what do you want to do with him? With all of this? I didn't answer immediately, because even I didn't yet know. I only knew one thing with certainty. Oliver had underestimated the one currency he could never manipulate, the truth. An hour later, the receptionist buzzed my office. Miss Whitford, there is a woman here asking to speak with you. She says her name is Lydia Harrington. I froze. Lydia. Oliver's mistress. The woman he replaced me with. The woman he let wear my clothes. The woman he let live in my home. Slowly, I exhaled. Send her to the side waiting room, I said. Tell her I will join her shortly. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You're meeting her? Yes. Is that wise? It's necessary, because sometimes the truth doesn't come from documents or files. Sometimes it walks right to your door, wearing bright lipstick and a trembling smile. I found Lydia sitting on the edge of the sofa, knees together, hands clasped tightly. She was dressed in a fitted coat, expensive but ill-chosen, the kind someone wears when trying too hard to look put together. Her eyes lifted the moment I entered. Elena, she said softly, thank you for seeing me. Her voice wasn't what I expected. It wasn't smug or triumphant or gloating. It was scared. What do you want, Lydia? I asked gently. She swallowed. I don't know where else to go. I said nothing, allowing her to continue. She twisted the strap of her handbag between her fingers. Oliver told me everything was fine. He told me he had money coming in. He told me we would move somewhere new soon. But now he's been shouting, breaking things. He says people are threatening him. He says he might lose everything. My heart did not soften, but my understanding deepened. She wasn't his partner. She was his crutch, his illusion, the mask he wore to hide from the truth closing in around him. And why come to me? I asked. Because, her voice cracked, because he said it was your fault. I almost laughed. Of course he did. He said, she continued, tears gathering, that you were destroying him on purpose, that you wanted revenge, that you would drag him into the ground if he didn't fix things between you, fix things. The irony almost tasted sweet. Lydia, I said quietly, Oliver is not being destroyed by me. He is being exposed by his own actions. She stared at me, lips trembling. I think he's hiding things from you, she whispered. More than you know. I leaned forward. What things? She hesitated before opening her bag and pulling out a small black USB stick. He told me never to touch his desk drawer, she murmured. But last night he left in a hurry. I found this. She held it out with shaking fingers. For a moment, I simply looked at it resting in her palm. The final card in a collapsing house. Why give it to me? I asked. Her answer was soft, broken. Because he doesn't love me. He never did. I was stupid. I thought I mattered. But all I was convenient. Her voice wasn't proud. It wasn't competitive. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And honesty deserved at least a fragment of compassion. I took the USB from her hand. Lydia, I said gently, go home, find somewhere safe, and stay away from him. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. Will he go to prison? She whispered. I did not answer, because the truth was evolving faster than even I had predicted. When she left, I returned to the office and handed the USB to Thomas. Within moments, he had it connected, files opening one by one. His expression changed. Elena, he breathed, you need to see this. The documents were worse than anything we had uncovered so far. Hidden accounts, falsified planning permissions, illegal subcontractors, payments under the table, email chains showing Oliver had knowingly covered up safety breaches. I felt no triumph, only inevitability. Justice is not loud. Justice is quiet, methodical, patient. And justice had finally arrived for Oliver Hart. Elena, Thomas said slowly, there is no scenario in which he survives this. I nodded, quiet, steady. Prepare everything, I said. Our next step is legal escalation, and once that begins, nothing will stop it. As Thomas left the room, I looked at the screens in front of me. Each document a thread in the web Oliver had spun around himself. And for the first time, I whispered something I had never allowed myself to say. It's over, Oliver. But then, I felt something else rise within me. Not anger, not vengeance, purpose. Because this wasn't just the end of his empire. It was the beginning of mine. There's a strange sort of calm that arrives just before the world cracks open. A deceptive quiet. A breath held too long. A sense that whatever is coming next will change everything." That was the calm of the morning Oliver walked into the lion's den without knowing it. By midday, Thomas and the legal team had compiled the full dossier, every falsified report, every diverted payment, every off-the-record contractor, every cut corner that risked public safety. The USB Lydia gave us was the missing spine connecting all the scattered bones. It was no longer a story of infidelity or cruelty. It was a case of criminal misconduct. And now, the decision rested with me. Outside my office window, London moved with its usual indifference. Buses roared, cyclists weaved. City workers in navy coats rushed along pavements. Life carried on, as if my world wasn't tilted beneath my feet. Thomas entered without knocking. "Elena, he's arrived." I closed the file gently. "Bring him to the boardroom." When Oliver walked in, everything about him looked diminished. His suit hung wrong. His eyes were bloodshot. He tried to force a confident smirk, but it never reached his eyes. "Elena," he said, pulling out a chair as though we were still equals. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." I didn't sit. Not yet. Instead, I watched him carefully, the way you watch a candle trying desperately not to go out. "Oliver," I said, "this isn't a conversation. This is a disclosure." Thomas placed the thick binder on the table with a quiet thud that seemed to echo around the room. Oliver's eyes flicked to it, then away, too quickly. "What is this?" he asked. "The truth," Thomas said evenly. I nodded once. "You manipulated financial statements. You redirected funds. You hired unlicensed subcontractors. You lied on official documents. You concealed safety defects. And you nearly caused a structural failure on a site that could have cost lives." He blanched. "That's absurd," he choked out. "You're twisting things. You're taking them out of context." "Everything is dated," Thomas replied. "Everything is authenticated. Much of it came from your own devices." Oliver gripped the edge of the table. "Elena, darling, listen to me." I raised a hand. That single gesture silenced him. "You lost the right to call me that the day you locked me out of my own house." He closed his mouth. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something human, fear, maybe. Shame, or perhaps just the horror of a man realizing that the world no longer bends around him. "You wanted a meeting," I said. "So here it is. You will listen." He swallowed hard and nodded. I continued. "You will repay every debt you owe. You will hand over full disclosure to the authorities. You will respond to every legal inquiry. And you will do so without obstruction." His jaw tightened. "And if I don't?" I leaned forward slightly. "Then the Metropolitan Police will receive everything you see in this binder, including the USB Lydia discovered." The mention of her name made him jolt. "Lydia," he whispered. She gave you something. She has nothing to do with this." "She was living in the wreckage you created," I replied softly. "She deserved to know the truth as much as anyone else." He sagged back in the chair. "Elena, please, don't ruin me." The word ruin nearly made me laugh. He ruined our marriage. He ruined my home. He ruined his own reputation. He ruined the lives of workers who trusted him. He ruined everything he claimed to build. But I didn't laugh. I simply said, "Oliver, you did that all by yourself." He opened his mouth again, some mixture of plea and denial, but the door swung open before he could speak. Thomas stepped aside to allow two people in, a solicitor in a charcoal suit, and a police officer. Oliver's face drained of colour entirely. "Elena," he whispered, horrified, "what have you done?" "Not nearly as much as you did," I said. The officer approached the table. "Mr. Oliver Hart? We're here to ask you some questions regarding discrepancies in your financial records and potential violations of safety regulations." Oliver pushed back his chair. "Questions? That's all? Then fine, I'll answer questions. I'm not under arrest." "Not at this stage," the officer replied, "but that depends on your cooperation." Oliver looked at me desperately, as though expecting mercy. But mercy isn't blind. It sees everything. And sometimes it knows when to turn its face away. "You'll comply," I said, my voice low but steady. "If you walk away now, the next visit won't be this polite." He realized, finally, that his old tricks, his charm, his arrogance, his entitlement had no power here. The officer guided him out. His solicitor followed. When the door closed, silence returned to the boardroom, thicker than before. Thomas let out a slow breath. "Well," he said, "that was controlled." I nodded. It had to be. And yet, beneath all the steel in my voice, something unexpected stirred. Sadness. Not for Oliver as a husband, I had grieved that long before he betrayed me, but for the waste of potential, for the man he chose to become, for the fact that he threw away a life we could have built, not out of love for someone else, but out of ego. But sadness is not a place to live, only a place to pass through. Minutes later, I stood alone by the large window overlooking the city. Perhaps the most surreal moment of all wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't the police. It wasn't the legal implications now set in motion. It was the quiet realization that I wasn't trembling anymore. For months, even years, I'd lived in the shadow of a man who convinced me I was small. But in this room, this moment, I saw the truth clearly. I wasn't small. I had simply been standing beside someone who needed me to believe I was. My phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. "We'll prepare next steps. He won't be able to hide anything else." Another from the legal team. "The authorities are already reviewing the files. They'll take it from here." And one more, from a number I didn't recognize at first. "Thank you for telling the truth. Lydia." I closed my eyes for a second, because even if everything else was fractured, at least one thing had been set right. Someone else had escaped him too. The door opened again. Thomas stood there, expression softer this time. "Elena, are you all right?" I turned toward him, and for the first time since the night Oliver shut the door in my face, I could answer honestly. "Yes," I said. "I think I finally am." He nodded, and there was something in his eyes, respect, perhaps, or something even more personal that I didn't quite know how to hold yet. "We'll manage the next steps," he said gently. "You don't have to carry everything." But what he didn't realize was, I wasn't carrying anything anymore. I was letting go. The weight wasn't mine. It never had been. Outside, the clouds shifted, letting a wash of afternoon light spill across the city. And for the first time, I didn't just see London. I saw my future, and it belonged to me alone. There is a particular kind of silence that settles in once truth has been spoken aloud. Not the silence of peace, nor the silence of fear, but the silence of inevitability. That was the silence filling my office the morning after Oliver left in the custody of the police for questioning. Not arrested yet, not charged yet, but the wheels had begun turning. And once they began, they never stopped. Thomas stood beside the large window, arms folded, watching the city as though trying to calculate its next movement. "You've changed things," he said quietly. I looked up from the documents spread across my desk. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I only showed the truth. He turned towards me, softer now. "Elena, you faced the one person who tried to dismantle your life, and you didn't flinch." I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, but because I wasn't sure I recognized the woman he was describing. Before I could respond, the door opened. A member of staff stepped in. "Miss Whitford, there's someone here asking for you. A Mr. Andrew Caldwell." My breath stilled. Oliver's business partner. One of the men who had looked at me for years, as though I was simply an accessory in Oliver's life. A silent wife with no understanding of business. "Send him in," I said. Andrew entered the room with the discomfort of a man who wasn't sure whether he was stepping into a meeting or stepping into danger. He removed his hat awkwardly and forced a tight smile. "Elena, may I call you Elena?" "You always have," I said calmly. "What do you want?" He cleared his throat. "I heard, well, everyone's heard, about Oliver, about the investigation, about the audit. News travels quickly when the foundations are rotten," I replied. He winced. "I came because I want you to know something, not to defend him. He made his choices. But you need to understand the scale of what you're dealing with." I folded my hands. "I understand more than you think." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You don't. Oliver wasn't just reckless. He was desperate. The debts weren't only hidden from you, they were hidden from me, from lenders, from contractors. He signed risky deals behind my back, pledged assets that weren't his to pledge, And if this reaches the newspapers, he didn't finish the sentence. It will, I said simply. Andrew sank into the chair opposite me. Elena, if the company collapses under investigation, people will lose jobs. Good people, men and women with families. This wasn't their doing. So, what are you asking? I said. For me to protect Oliver? No, he said quickly. Protect the workers, protect the innocent ones. That, at least, struck something in me. I will not let anyone suffer for Oliver's mistakes, I said. But I will not shield him either. Accountability is not cruelty, it is justice. Andrew exhaled in relief. I hoped you'd say that. Thomas moved closer, crossing his arms. We can coordinate with the administrators once charges are formalized, he said. There are pathways to preserve essential operations. Andrew nodded gratefully and stood. You're not the person he painted you to be, he said before leaving. You're far more capable than he ever let on. When he was gone, Thomas glanced at me. And another thread unravels. I nodded slowly. Yes. But this time, the unraveling is revealing the truth, not hiding it. Later that afternoon, as I reviewed the projected legal timeline, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something intuition, perhaps, made me answer. Elena Whitford speaking. A hesitant breath sounded on the other end. Miss Whitford, this is Detective Sergeant Hargreaves. We've concluded the initial questioning of Mr. Hart. There are developments. I sat up straighter. I'm listening. Mr. Hart attempted to deny everything at first. But the evidence is overwhelming. He shifted position. He now states he is willing to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. I closed my eyes briefly. Meaning he will plead guilty? Not yet. But if his solicitor advises it, he may. There's one more matter. We recovered documents from his flat, some relating to a past project. There were concerns raised at the time about structural issues. It appears Mr. Hart buried those concerns. My breath stilled. That could have killed someone. Yes, Ms. Whitford, that's why this is no longer a civil inquiry. It is a criminal one. We will keep you informed. When the call ended, the room felt impossibly still. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't afraid. But I felt something deep and solemn settle inside me. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Responsibility. I didn't destroy him. I revealed him. And now the law was doing what it must. That evening, Thomas returned to the office carrying 2 cups of tea. He set one before me and sat across the table. You've been quiet, he observed. I'm thinking. About Oliver? No, I said, surprising both him and myself. Not anymore. He studied me with a thoughtful expression. Then what? About what comes next. He leaned back. Then let's talk about it. I looked out of the window. London's skyline glowed in the dusk, golden lights flickering like embers of a world I was finally stepping into, not away from. For the first time, I said softly, my life isn't defined by what someone else did to me. Thomas nodded slowly. It's defined by what you choose to do now. I turned back toward him. That's exactly it. We spent the next hour discussing the expansion of Whitford Heritage Holdings, the land investments, the training programs for rural communities I wanted to develop, affordable housing projects, renewable energy possibilities, initiatives my father dreamt of but never lived to build. Every plan we drafted felt less like vengeance and more like purpose. And purpose is a steadier flame. At some point, Thomas paused and looked at me in that long, assessing way he had. Elena, he said gently, you know this already, but I'll say it anyway. You didn't just reclaim your life, you're transforming it. And people are going to follow you because of that. I exhaled slowly. I never wanted to lead. You were leading long before you realized, he said softly. The words settled into me like warmth. Later, when he had gone and the building emptied for the night, I remained at the window, watching headlights snake across the bridges, watching the city breathe. Somewhere out there, Oliver was facing the consequences of choices he thought he could outrun. But this wasn't about him anymore. My life wasn't circling around his orbit. It wasn't bound by his mistakes. For the first time in years, my story wasn't a reaction. It was a beginning. a real one. One built on quiet strength, earned clarity, and the unshakable truth that rose from the ashes of everything I lost. He didn't break me. He freed me. And now, the life ahead was mine to shape with steadier hands, wiser eyes, and a heart that no longer feared the silence, but welcomed it. Because silence, at last, meant peace. If there's one thing I've learnt, it's this. Your life doesn't fall apart to punish you. It falls apart to free you, to clear the ground, to make space for something truer, steadier, and entirely your own. Oliver's downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was waking up one morning and realizing I no longer wished him harm. I simply wished myself peace. Whitford Heritage Holdings has grown into a force far bigger than my past. The land my father protected now supports families, trains new generations, and builds futures I will never fully see. And that, somehow, makes it even more beautiful. If you're listening to this from your home, your car, your quiet room, I hope you remember one thing. You are allowed to begin again. Thank you for being here. And wherever you are in the UK or the world, I wish you strength, rest, and a gentle tomorrow.